Today we're going to continue looking at dimensional analysis. I wanted to go over your practice problem and get you set up before we start a lab that we're going to be doing over a couple days. And so let's just start with this practice problem. And the problem had said how many seconds are in 1 year, and you were asked to see if you could solve this using the ideas of dimensional analysis from the day before. So I'm just going to walk through it with you and show you those steps and just remind you of what you would do and how you would go about solving it. So let's just start with, remember that we always want to start by finding out what our known and our unknown is in a story problem. Now this problem is actually a story problem, right? Because it's written as a sentence with a question. It's saying, if we have this, how much of this is there? So it says, how many seconds are in 1 year? So remember, we're going to start by identifying what our known and our unknown is. Now remember, our known is always given, right? So in this problem, the fact that we're told we have 1 year, that's given, right? That's our known. We have 1 year. Now I am going to make a note for you because some of you might have rounded or decided not to round or whatever, but since it says a year, that's like saying like an exact amount, so there's no significant figures in that measurement. Alright, so in saying 1 year, there's no sig figs in that. We're saying exactly 1 year. Alright, unknown is what? Well, remember, the unknown is always the question. So in this case, the question was, how many seconds, right? So how many seconds? So we said our known was a year. Our unknown is the number of seconds. Okay? Now the next thing, remember, would be a relationship. And this is probably where it got a little tricky for you, because you probably were able to maybe do some calculating or some figuring out, but you might have not really been sure about setting up and all of that. So let's just talk about the relationships. Now, is there a relationship between a year and seconds? We don't necessarily know it, but we do know some other relationships. Like, for example, in 1 year, we know that there's 365 days. Now, you might say, well, what about leap year, right, where there's 366? But assuming a year, we would just assume 365. All right, we could also probably say a relationship like 1 day equals 24 hours. We also might say that we have a relationship between hours and minutes, right? So we know that in 1 hour, there are 60 minutes. We also know minutes and seconds. 1 minute equals 60 seconds, right? Those are all relationships that we could have that could allow us to go from years into seconds. Now this is where we're going to notice this gets a little complicated, right? Because on all the ones that we did in class, we only had one step. But many of the ones that we're going to start to see as we're moving forward, the ones that we'll start to see as you do your dimensional analysis Olympics and then in class and quizzes and tests, is that we're going to have probably more than one step. We could have 2, we could have 10 steps, depending on what we're trying to go into. Now, you really aren't going to see that many that have more than 2 or 3 steps, but you know, there might be a few just as you're trying to practice the dimensional analysis. So let's just start with, based on this, we could also do conversion factors, right? We could say 1 year over 365 days, or we could say 365 days over 1 year, right? That's a conversion factor. We could do it for days and hours. 1 day, not 1 days, but 1 day over 24 hours, or 24 hours over 1 day. 1 hour over 60 minutes, or 60 minutes over 1 hour, and then 1 minute over 60 seconds, or 60 seconds over 1 minute. Alright, so these are all relationships that we have, relationships that allow us to compare something that we know with something that we don't know. So now let's just start with what our setup should look like, right? Because that should be our next step, is to start with 1 year remember, over 1. And in the end, we are trying to go into seconds. All right, so let's just start at the beginning. We're in years. We don't want years. We want to end up in seconds. So before we can get to seconds, we're first going to have to go to what? We're going to have to go to days. So which of these two conversion factors would allow us to be able to get rid of years and give us something other than years, which means years would have to be on the bottom, which means days on the top, and that would be this conversion factor, right? 365 days. Alright, so now we're in days, but we don't want days. We're trying to get to seconds. So what's our next relationship? We've got days and hours. So which one of these conversion factors would work? Well, remember, again, we want days to cancel, so days on the bottom, which means hours on the top, and which one of those would work? It would be this one, right? 24 hours in 1 day. Alright, but we're not to seconds yet. We're still only in hours. So we need another step. Alright, so either we're going to convert to hours or we're converting to minutes. And we would see it would be this one, right? That would be hours on the bottom, minutes on the top, and it would look something like that. Alright, so we're not to seconds yet. We're only in minutes, so now we want to go into seconds. So we need a conversion, something that will allow us to get rid of minutes, which means minutes on the bottom, seconds on the top, and now we've got our setup, right? Now it's just a matter of solving the problem. Now remember that we called this dimensional analysis because we multiply everything that's on the top and we divide by anything that's on the bottom. So we can start here, 1 year times 365 times 24 times 60 times 60, and then divide by whatever's on the bottom, which in this case is all 1. So let's just do that. Take a minute right now. Go ahead and solve if you didn't already, and see if you can get how many seconds are in 1 year. Alright, and when you do it, you should get a number that looks something like this. 3, 1, 5, 3, 6, 1, 2, 3 zeros. So 31,536,000 seconds in 1 year. Now, this where you might say, well, what about rounding for significance? And since all of your values are exact values, right? So we said 1 year was an exact value, and all of these dimensional analysis conversions are all exact values as well. That would mean that no rounding needed. We can just simply leave the number as is. There are exactly that many seconds in a year. So we wouldn't have to round, we could just leave the number as is. Now remember, the reason we round with significant figures is because we measure things, and we're going to do some of that in the activity you're going to be doing coming up in the next day, but for now, that would be it. Now, Miss Golson is going to lead you in starting some practice with dimensional analysis, just to practice it, make sure you feel comfortable with it, kind of goes over it with you, has you practicing with the metric system, kind of gives you some more practice, sets you up for tomorrow when you'll be starting then something called Dimensional Analysis Olympics. Thanks. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to come in and see me. Hope you have a great day. Bye.